According to statistics from the Education Ministry, there's a steady increase in the number of Vietnamese students on Taiwanese campuses. In 2014, there were about 3,700 students who came from Vietnam to pursue their college degree. And 10 years later, that number has gone up to more than 27,000 students per year. Is this a trend? And what's the factor driving these students from Vietnam to Taiwan? You are listening to The Divide. My name is Iris Xu. Today I'm speaking with Giang Nguyen, a visiting scholar at the Center for Southeast Asian Studies at the National Chengchi University. His research centers around the view and space for debate in Vietnamese media about Taiwanese democracy and diplomacy. Mr. Giang Nguyen spent about 4 months in Taiwan and he has met many Vietnamese students.
Well, I think it's not a new thing to have met with Vietnamese students or PhD researchers from Vietnam, because I have been always in contact with quite a lot of people in Vietnam when I was working for the BBC in London. Also, when I was working as a senior visiting fellow in Singapore on Southeast Asia, including Vietnam, I have made friends with quite a lot of people who come in and out. In the beginning, it seemed to me that Taiwan is a bit unknown to many of the Vietnamese scholars. I'm talking about the higher level of education. But if you look at the number of students coming from Vietnam, actually, I can say that they have discovered Taiwan as a very good destination for studies. I have met with quite a lot at the NTU meetings. I attended even one PhD thesis defending ceremony with a young Vietnamese doctor in physics who is already working on a few projects for Taiwanese companies, because the NTU's leadership, I understand, work very closely with the industry, which is very good for researchers. And at NCCU, where I'm staying at the moment, in the Center for Southeast Asian Studies, I have encountered, at least 5 to 6 guest speakers from Vietnam who have come to share their views on Taiwan, on Taiwan-Vietnamese relations. I attended one conference in Wenzhou University in Kaohsiung, and there's quite a lot of Vietnamese coming. I was quite surprised, nicely surprised, because younger colleagues come to talk about South China Sea issues, about how to learn. They look at the methodology of learning Chinese in Vietnam or teaching Chinese. I met with a MA student at Sư Ta, so the normal university here, and she writing her MA thesis on exactly teaching Chinese in Vietnam. She has some experience there. So my point is, actually, what I see is there is a very wide range of studies and subjects and disciplines where the Vietnamese are working on some specifically interesting topics for themselves and for their universities and for their career in the future. So what I can see that, apart from the number, which is now around 27,000 Vietnamese from Vietnam studying at various universities and colleges in Taiwan, from literally from north to south to the east, in Taitung, in Tainan, in Hualien. I met also with some people from there. Because, obviously I'm from the UK, but I'm Vietnamese, so we meet up in restaurants, at the gathering, in some families, dinners, this kind of thing. And my feeling is, actually, they feel very happy about having made this kind of decision to come to Taiwan. And obviously, they know about study in the UK, which is also very good. But they share with me the concern that the cost of living in Britain, cost of living are much higher than Taiwan. And here they can study either in Chinese, in I would say a mixed mode of a bit of Chinese for MA thesis. They have to submit some of the coursework, and then or in English, which is very good. Some of them have studied, finished or completed their MA thesis here entirely in English, and then continue to work in Taiwanese company using English as a main language of the workplace. And I was quite surprised. Wow, I mean, we have that problem in Europe, except Britain and Ireland. Say in Germany or France, you cannot use English for study in many universities there. Or even if you can study, you can be on a course in France, in Spain, or in Germany. You have to speak the local language to a quite on a decent level to find a job in a job market. I think in Paris it's fine, but you go beyond Paris. I was actually in France last year and met with some people there, and they say, yeah, you need to speak very good French. In Germany, even worse, you have to have a quite high level of proficiency in German to get a job. But look at Taiwan. Taiwan is a much smaller country. Obviously, in terms of income per capita, the Taiwanese are earning better than many now West European countries, including Britain, and the cost of living much higher. And the distance, proximity with Vietnam, is just 2 hours of flight. Within 2 hours flight, or slightly more than that. So Taiwan has become a very attractive option for studying for the Vietnamese. Yeah.
As of today, Vietnamese students make up the largest foreign students community on campus in Taiwan. Do they want to stay in Taiwan after graduation?
Well, I can't talk for them, but as far as I see, quite a number of the new friends I have made in Taipei, they stay here. They if they can get a job in a Taiwanese or in American Taiwanese or in any kind of companies, some of them set up businesses to work between Vietnam and Taiwan. I don't know, because the number is quite big, but the job market here is also very vibrant. Some of them, I met two younger men working in the semiconductor industry in Hsinchu last week. We just went there, Someone said, "Oh, you want to talk to people who are working in the sort of premium industry now, they make a lot of money." And I said, "I'm going to call them out to a hotel and have a chat and have a drink." And one had actually graduated from an American university in Houston, Texas, but he got a job offer here and he came here. So you see, Taiwan has become a hub of international talents. Not to mention some Indonesians, I think some even Germans or Spaniards. We met on the programs, on the MOFA fellowship program. They also come here, and some of them literally said to the rest, "Oh, I'm looking for a job here."
As a Taiwan Fellow, Mr. Nguyen has decided to spend 4 months in Taiwan, and here's his story to his research and why he chose Taiwan.
Long story short, I has been always interested in Taiwan as a Mandarin-speaking country, but with a different history and a different take on the geopolitics of East Asia. Basically, the system here is different from what is in China. I study history in Europe and media as well, and I've been working with the BBC. And in 2006, I had my first chance to come to Taiwan to conduct some interviews. And I remember at that time, the Taiwanese side, the Taiwanese MOFA, some university colleagues, friends were very helpful. They arranged for me to witness this debate in the Taipei parliament, so local parliament, to see the debate. At that time, my Mandarin Chinese was still very poor, but I could get the sense of what is going on. It's a vibrant democracy. The debate was there, people talking to each other, discussing, debating, very much like the British Westminster system. And then I had a chance to interview Xiao Bi Kim when she was, I think, an MP or a politician on the local level. Now she's the deputy. She's a vice president. So I got an interest, and I kept sort of following Taiwanese politics, and obviously how Taiwan is being seen from Vietnam. And I discovered actually a gap, which is because in Vietnam, people talk about Taiwan more in terms of economic benefits. So if you go to Taiwan, you can learn, you can study, you can work. There are a lot of migrant workers here. I think they are numbered just sort of, they rank second to Indonesians. But then there is something, I think, for the Vietnamese, it's a bit like they lack a bit of information about what's happening with the politics of Taiwan. You can look at the pros and cons of Taiwanese politics. Sometimes the MPs are bickering, even fighting each other in the parliament. But I think that is not true picture of the whole process. So I proposed to Taiwanese MOFA that I would come to Taiwan if I get the scholarship to study, to look at the Vietnamese perception of Taiwanese democracy and diplomacy. And I was quite lucky because they approved it, and I got a fellowship. So that's how I came. And during my 4 months here, I conducted a lot of interviews with people from Vietnam and from abroad. Literally, in my research, I interviewed 7 opinion makers, like journalists, former diplomats, research scientists. So 7 in Vietnam, 3 abroad, 2 in Australia, 1 in Europe, to get their views on the Taiwanese process to democracy and what's happening now, vis-a-vis China, and sort of the perceived threat from China to Taiwan. And I put it in my research. I did some data crunching and everything, and it turned out to be a very positive picture, at least a perception. There is a very positive perception among the Vietnamese elite about what's happening in Taiwan. And obviously some of them say there's a gap between Vietnam and Taiwan. Taiwan has advanced almost like 30, even 40 years before the Vietnamese society. Some of them say that the lesson from Taiwan is just a reference point. Then we cannot learn much. But the majority believes that at least the Vietnamese in the near future, if they want to liberalize their politics, they can learn from the Taiwanese experiment in adopting and implementing democratic principles, free media. But then the most interesting thing is some of the Vietnamese opinion makers believe that actually Taiwan is quite unique in the sense that Taiwan as a society has retained, they say, the best values from the ancient Chinese cultures. There is continuity from the old Republican China into the new society, which has then embraced a lot of more elements, a very progressive elements, almost like Western Europe. So that is the thing I looked at basically, and obviously I looked at the 2 events, which is Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan a few years ago, the reaction from China, and then what's happening within the Vietnamese Facebook communities about William Lai's victory early this year. So there, I analyzed all the data. I backed them up with the comments from the 10 experts, and I produced a research paper.
Coming back to the Vietnamese students community in Taiwan, Taiwan is an obvious studying location if you want to go into semiconductor industry, but are liberal arts majors a consideration for the Vietnamese students?
Yes, I think some of them. But the more interesting thing is there are a lot of young Taiwanese at the NTU's College of Liberal Arts studying Vietnamese. So I gave a lecture to them a few weeks ago. They to a class of students about like 25, 30. And they keep asking me exactly what you are doing now, meaning how the Vietnamese think about Taiwan, what the perception of Taiwan as a society in Vietnam. And then there's another group, which is the Taiwanese born in Vietnam to mixed families. I met one actually. The interesting thing is she comes from the Mekong Delta, grew up there, but now she had learned very good to speak Chinese very well. We came back here. I think she was born here and then brought there by her mum somehow. And then she speaks very good English first. For me, it's quite nicely surprising. And so she already trilingual. And she's studying at the NCCU about exactly that. So Vietnamese culture within the context of Southeast Asian nations, embracing the studies in Taiwan.
And speaking of studies in Taiwan, I asked Mr. Nguyen about his findings in Taiwan for his research.
The social media in Vietnam, which is the space there, the space for debate is much open. I look at, say, BBC Vietnamese Facebook, but I also compared it with the official narrative about Taiwan in the Vietnamese media landscape, which is very much known, which is they have to accept the One China policy. So I think they rarely mention Taiwan in depth. They mention Taiwan, they report on what happenings between Taiwan and China, on the drills and the cross-trade relations. But I think they sort of, either they have no knowledge or either they cannot. For some reason, they cannot. But I also met with people who come here from the media in Vietnam or from the colleges where they have media departments, especially during my very short stay in Kaohsiung at that conference about Southeast Asian studies. I think they're younger, they have no sort of historical biases against, say, communism or non-communism or anti-communism, this kind of thing. So they just think about Taiwan as a modern, a more advanced society compared to Vietnam, and they want to come here to learn or to present their research papers, and that's all.
After speaking with Mr. Giang Nguyen about Taiwan, his research, and Vietnamese students community in Taiwan, I asked him about the media landscape in Vietnam.
In Vietnam, there is no private media. Under the so-called socialist system, all the media have to be in the hands of the state. It's a bit like China, a bit like the Soviet Union before. Having said that, we can say that the Vietnamese media are much more liberal than other countries, because in Vietnam they're not, a bit unlike China. They have no sort of very strong nationalistic agenda, and people in the media, some of them are good friends of mine. They're quite open-minded. They travel the world. They know the languages. If they don't speak good English, at least they have their children or family members, studying or living in Western countries, in Australia, Singapore. So they are, in a sense, quite liberal. But obviously, if you look at the media, say the military media or the police media, they are more conservative, naturally, everywhere. But if you look at the media in Vietnam, you cannot avoid talking about the social media landscape, which is much freer than I think anywhere in the world, at least compared to some of the other socialist countries. Why? Because unlike China, Vietnam hasn't been able to build their own sort of intranet. They have no sort of new services like Weibo, China Weibo in China or WeChat. So they have to rely on Western social medias like Facebook, YouTube. So basically Google, which owns and runs YouTube, and Meta, runs Facebook, Instagram, they're all in Vietnam. They are present in Vietnam. They have some data would tell you there are 70 million Facebookers in Vietnam. So almost like 70% of the whole population, which is nearly 100 million people. And although sometimes they have to ask government for permit, or sometimes they have to remove certain content on request, because some contents are really toxic, like, child abusive scene and everything, or politically sort of incorrect in terms of, according to the government. But the rest of it, like I would say 95%, is pretty free, in the sense that if you want to post something, yes, you can, and the government may tell you, oh no, can you remove it? Some depending who you are. If you are someone not on the sort of dissident list, they ask you nicely, and you do it. But I guess there's no sort of confirmed policy, but the government want to see what's happening. What is they call the talk in town? on social media, so they can react. And to be fair, the Vietnamese government they are quite good at sort of rectifying their course of actions to address some of the issues which been talked about loudly on social media, like corruption. Some of the government officials suddenly got their gigantic villas posted on the internet, on Facebook, or someone else took the picture and posted. If you wait for a moment, a few months, you may see an investigation going on about corruption allegations. So this kind of thing. The government because the government first they cannot control it, and second, I think they're quite open to work with the big tech as well. That fact. I think quite a lot of government officials from Vietnam, they love to visit Silicon Valley's big tech companies. They invite big tech bosses from America, from other countries to come to visit, because they want to also to leverage the strength of big tech companies in Vietnam for the economy.
Thank you for listening. My name is Iris Xu, and this episode of The Divide is produced by Radio Taiwan International.